In the 13th century, the fate of Europe was at a turning point. Caught in a dramatic struggle that extended well beyond the battlefield and deep into the heart of political, religious, and ideological life. Have you ever wondered how a powerful emperor's challenge to papal authority helped shape the course of medieval history? Frederick II, ruler of the Holy Roman Empire, was far from an ordinary monarch. He dared to confront the supremacy of the Church in a way few others had ever attempted, casting doubt on the papal claim to dominance over Christian kingdoms and reshaping the political order of his time. In this video, we'll dive deep into this historic confrontation, packing the key stages of this epic rivalry. From early tensions and excommunications to wars that changed the balance of power in Europe forever. This wasn't just a religious disagreement. It was a political and territorial showdown that redrew borders, transformed dynasties, and altered the future of the continent. By the end, you'll understand how the ambitions of one man and the defiance of the Church laid the foundations for a new chapter in medieval history. To truly understand this monumental clash, we have to begin at the roots. Frederick II was born in 1194 to a family of immense legacy and influence. He was the grandson of Frederick Barbarossa, one of the most iconic emperors of the Holy Roman Empire, and the son of Emperor Henry VI and Constance of Sicily. But his early years were far from secure. After losing his father at just a few years old, Frederick was placed under the guardianship of the Church. Pope Innocent III took on the role of his protector and saw in him the chance to shape a future ruler loyal to papal authority. That plan didn't work out. As he grew older, Frederick demonstrated qualities that set him apart. He was intelligent, highly educated, multilingual, and fiercely independent. Once he assumed full control of his titles and dominions, he began to consolidate his rule and assert authority over lands the Church considered within its sphere of influence. He aimed to strengthen his grip over Sicily and Germany, and as his influence grew, so too did his willingness to confront the power of the papacy. Frederick was not only a political and military leader, but also a cultural visionary. He spoke Latin, German, Italian, Arabic, and Greek, encouraged scholars and scientists at his court, and enacted legal reforms that were ahead of their time. His court in Palermo became a center for the arts, philosophy, and intellectual exchange. But this enlightened and pragmatic style of leadership stood in sharp contrast to the rigid orthodoxy of the Church. The papacy began to see Frederick's independence not as admirable, but as dangerous. The tensions that had simmered during Frederick's youth finally boiled over in his adulthood. When he was crowned emperor in 1220 by Pope Honorius III, it seemed like a symbolic alliance between the empire and the Church. However, that coronation came with a clear condition. Frederick promised to lead a crusade to reclaim Jerusalem. Instead of setting off for the Holy Land, however, he focused on securing power at home, reorganizing Sicily, and dealing with challenges in Germany. These delays infuriated the Church, which believed it had been betrayed. In 1227, Pope Gregory IX took action. Tired of Frederick's excuses and perceived disobedience, the Pope excommunicated him for failing to embark on the crusade. In medieval Europe, excommunication was no small matter. It could destroy a ruler's credibility, weaken their alliances, and cast doubt on their divine legitimacy. But Frederick didn't crumble under pressure. Instead, he went on the crusade anyway, while still officially excommunicated. Frederick's journey to the Holy Land in 1228 was unprecedented. Never before had a Christian ruler launched a crusade under such circumstances. What followed was even more surprising. Instead of engaging in costly and bloody battles, Frederick turned to diplomacy. Through skillful negotiation with Sultan Al-Kamil of Egypt, he secured the peaceful return of Jerusalem to Christian control. This bloodless success was remarkable, yet the Pope refused to acknowledge it. To Gregory IX, any act by a man under excommunication was illegitimate, regardless of the outcome. Upon returning from the crusade, Frederick found his realm under attack. The Pope had launched a military campaign against the Kingdom of Sicily, hoping to undermine Frederick's power. But the emperor quickly responded, driving papal forces out and forcing Gregory IX into a reluctant peace. While there was a temporary lull in open conflict, the deeper ideological and political struggle was far from over. The Sixth Crusade had demonstrated two key realities. First, Frederick II was a shrewd strategist who did not need the Church's approval to achieve remarkable outcomes. Second, the conflict between the Empire and the Papacy was not just a disagreement, it had become a full-scale ideological war over the future of Christendom. The situation escalated further throughout the 1230s. Gregory IX grew increasingly alarmed by Frederick's ambition and authority. In 1239, the Pope once again excommunicated the Emperor, this time with even harsher rhetoric. He declared Frederick an enemy of the Church and a threat to the Christian world. The Pope's allies began spreading pamphlets accusing Frederick of heresy, of sympathizing with Islam, and even of blasphemy. This campaign aimed to isolate him both politically and spiritually. Frederick fought back with equal determination. He launched military operations against papal territories, and his navy clashed with church forces at sea. In 1241, his troops captured a papal fleet and nearly imprisoned the Pope himself. Gregory IX died shortly afterward, sparing himself that humiliation. But the conflict did not end. The next Pope, Innocent IV, was even more hostile. In 1245, Pope Innocent IV convened the Council of Lyon, where he took the radical step of officially deposing Frederick. This was the first time in history that a pope had declared a reigning Holy Roman Emperor illegitimate. Innocent urged German princes to turn against their emperor and elect a new one, but many were reluctant to defy Frederick openly. The Pope's actions emboldened his enemies and deepened the rift within the empire. Despite being under excommunication and intense pressure, Frederick retained much of his power. But his position was weakening. The war with the Papacy dragged on, draining resources and loyalty. The Pope's propaganda worked, more nobles began defecting, particularly in northern Italy. The capture of Frederick's son, Enzio, in 1249 was another serious blow. Enzio, a key military leader, remained in prison for the rest of his life. Frederick's once loyal circle of advisors began to waver. Some switched sides, aligning with the Papacy. The emperor's military campaigns grew more difficult, and resistance to his rule intensified. Then, in 1250, after a sudden illness, Frederick died at the castle of Fiorentino in southern Italy. His death didn't end the war, but it marked the collapse of Hohenstaufen hopes for imperial dominance. After his death, the Holy Roman Empire fractured. Frederick's heirs were unable to assert control, and the central authority he had worked so hard to build began to unravel. Rival factions fought for dominance, and the Pope took advantage of the chaos to consolidate papal power, especially in Italy. Frederick's defeat may have appeared to be a papal triumph, but it revealed deeper problems within the Church's relationship with secular rulers. The tensions that had exploded during his reign didn't disappear. They laid the groundwork for later struggles, including the Avignon Papacy, the rise of secular monarchies, and ultimately, the Reformation. The lasting legacy of this conflict wasn't just the fall of a dynasty, it was a shift in how power was understood in Europe. The battle between emperor and pope had shown that secular rulers could and would challenge the Church's supremacy. It also demonstrated that the Church's spiritual authority could be weaponized in the service of political goals. Frederick II's vision of governance was remarkably modern for his time. He believed in a centralized, efficient administration rooted in law, reason, and royal authority. Unlike other rulers who depended on the Church for legitimacy, he sought to establish a state that was self-sufficient and largely secular. His legal reforms, such as the Constitutions of Melfi, emphasized justice, rational governance, and the curtailment of feudal abuses. Culturally, Frederick was a revolutionary. He promoted science and empirical observation, invited scholars from across the known world to his court, and maintained a library that rivaled the great collections of antiquity. In an age dominated by dogma, Frederick's embrace of knowledge and cultural exchange set him apart. His legacy inspired later monarchs who pursued centralization and secular governance. Though his empire crumbled, his ideas endured. They helped shape the concept of the modern state, where law and reason could serve as a foundation for power, rather than the blessing of religious authorities. Even today, the struggle between Frederick II and the Papacy resonates. It reflects ongoing debates about the separation of church and state, the limits of religious authority, and the autonomy of political institutions. In many countries, questions still arise about the role of religion in public life, the influence of religious leaders, and the balance between faith and governance. Frederick's story invites us to consider a fundamental question. How should power be distributed between spiritual and temporal realms? His reign offers a bold, controversial answer vision of a world where rulers govern by the strength of their ideas and the structure of their institutions, rather than by the favor of religious leaders. In the end, Frederick II was a man who defied convention, challenged the most powerful institution of his time, and pursued a vision of rule that was centuries ahead of its time. His struggle with the papacy shaped a medieval world and left echoes that still reach us today. His story is not just a tale of war and rivalry, but a profound chapter in the history of freedom, governance, and the enduring tension between faith and power.